was gonna say parties. I don't go to parties. Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today I am very excited. This is my last sewing project of this year for y'all, and we're ending with a bang. I'm very excited about this one. So for today we will be doing, you guessed it, another gunnesax. I have a bit of a problem. I love gunnesax. My new problem next year is going to be overalls, but for now we're stuck on gunnesax. So I have this pattern here. This is actually a 70s gunnesax. I believe it's a 78. Most of the patterns I've been working with have been in the 80s. So this is fun a little bit earlier, and I feel like you can really tell by the sleeves of this not being as poofy or large. The ruffled dress featuring coordinating fabrics and lace trims has skirt attached to bodice at normal waistline, back zipper, long set sleeves, bands, peplum, tie-ins, and then there's a regular length and a long length. That is what we're working with here. This is another pattern tracing by, I believe it's Nostalgia Nymph. I have used pretty much all of her patterns at this point. And let's talk fabric, since that's the most exciting part of this project. So here is my pile of what I'm working with. So here, I don't know if you can tell on screen, but this is a snowflake print white fabric. It's like pretty meh. I don't know. It didn't live up to my vision of snowflake fabric, so I think this is going to be for kind of more the trims or the accents. And then this is going to be the main fabric. This is I think it's a poplin, which I should have ordered a lawn. So this dress is definitely going to be a little bit more sturdy and a little less flimsy and like lawn and soft than a lot of my other gunnesax dress, so I think it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Oh, I'm doubting my fabric choice again. We'll see. We'll see. I might switch it up. I have to decide, obviously, when I cut. This might be the accent fabric. I probably measure what I have of each and figure it out from there. I'm now panicking and changing my mind, which happens. What I don't have to change my mind on is I got this, hold up. Oh my goodness, I'm making a mess. I got this really pretty trim. They made the trim for the bottom of the skirt. I thought it was nice. I thought it looked like snowflakes. I think it's supposed to look like flowers. For the like smaller trim that goes all up around the bodice and stuff, I will grab that out of my usual drawer. There's like an underskirt piece to this that I'm gonna make out of this. It's this really nice sparkly snowflake. I have a bunch of this. This is for sure going to be on the ruffle at the bottom that sticks out. I'm actually going to make this on a separate skirt so I can wear it or not wear it depending on my mood, just because I think sometimes I'm not going to want the extra bit of fancy, I guess. So I think it would be good to have it kind of as a more optional piece. Honestly, I've been so excited about this project for months. I've been planning it since August-ish, when the idea of kind of like this gunnesax snow queen popped into my head, and I really liked it for like holidays type thing. I do celebrate Christmas, however, I don't really love the Christmas colors. So I was just looking for a way I could do something a little bit festive without having to do red and green, because I despise red and green. I like the color green, I will wear the color green. I basically don't wear the color red. So that's where I stand on those colors, and this will hopefully work out well for me. So with that, I will make some decisions and then we'll hop right into cutting this fabric. So first here I decided to start with the sparkly sequin fabric because I thought it might be the most complicated to work with. Here I am just checking kind of like the length on it, seeing how much I need to cut. And then I'm going to use a rotary cutter here. This was a little bit challenging because of the sequins, but it worked out just fine. So I just cut 2 long strips with this. I just cut basically everything near the lacy edge at the bottom. This was a double-sided fabric, so it also had this at the top, and that is what I'm going to use for the underskirt lace poking out. And then next up for this project, I am cutting out, this is just a basic white Kona cotton, and I'm going to cut the pockets and the underskirt on this just because neither of these will show on the outside of the garment, so I think it's nice to use a like cheaper, less decorated fabric to do this. So that way I can save money and save my snowflake print. Next up was cutting my snowflake fabric. I had to be really careful on this to get my laying it out just right. I had barely enough fabric. I had like a little bit left over, but not much. And they're all like weird small patches. But basically I laid out the pieces. I figured out exactly where they need to sit, and then I cut them out. While you're watching me cut out all this fabric, this is your reminder that I do have a Ko-fi where I take online tips for all the work I put into these garments and my channel. And then of course, if you are new, definitely hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you stick around. But let's now jump to cutting the blue fabric. First, for the blue fabric, I started by ripping it. I knew exactly what size of dimension of strips I needed. I did this just by ripping them across so they'd all be even, and then the edges would be like not finished, but they would be less likely to fray because they are actually square. I bought way too much fabric of this. I also did not really enjoy this poplin for this purpose, or in general, it was really hard to hand sew, so I don't know that I would highly recommend it. It did do the job for this, but I don't think I'll buy it again. But here I am just cutting out all the pieces. These are all the like different details that are going to be in this fabric that'll show up all over the dress. Good morning. So yesterday I cut out the fabric. It took me 4 hours and 45 minutes. So this project's gonna take me a wee bit longer than I expected. Usually cutting out fabric takes me 2 hours tops. I don't know why it took so long. I don't know if I was just moving kind of slow, but it is also like a lot of pieces. Intense. It was an intense day of cutting yesterday, and today I'm going to actually be sewing. It is about 10 o'clock. My plan is to sew, I think, till about 2, and then I need to film a different video, and then I'll get back to sewing after I film that video. So I expect to have probably like 6-ish hours of sewing today, so we're gonna just see what we can get done. Honestly, at this point, my goal is to do as much as I can today. I'm honestly having kind of a weird, like, mental health day. I don't know, there's a lot going on in the world, and it makes me sad and stresses me out. So yeah, I'm kind of in a funk. I expect to be sewing again tomorrow, whenever I have another day where I can sew all day. Yeah, this is going to be a long project, but having cut out my pieces, I'm really excited about all the pieces I cut out. So I think, while it's going to take a while, I think it's going to be really cool. And then today, since I'm planning on probably actively sewing for about 6 hours today, I'm wearing a corset to hopefully help me not slouch and mess up my back, as well as actually something for me when I'm high anxiety. It actually really helps me to wear a corset. Corsets for me, I feel like work similar to like weighted blankets, where they just kind of help ease that anxiety a little bit, because it's kind of like something hugging you. I think people with sensory stuff like me either really like loose clothing or really tight clothing when they're feeling distressed. I do like already feel better because I put on a nice dress and put on makeup and put on a corset, and I feel like that's helping my mental health a little bit. I also know sewing really helps my mental health. It's one of the biggest reasons I do it. So hoping to just have a really good sewing day where I can kind of turn off my brain a little bit and, just engage in kind of the meditative practice that is sewing for me. With that, we're just gonna go ahead and jump right into sewing. So first, to get started, I am sewing this princess seam. This is like the front bust and the side bust, essentially. Really straightforward. I remember a time where I didn't like princess busts because I would get kind of like intimidated by it, but now I definitely prefer them to darts. While sewing these together, I also worked on sewing the facing or the trim. It's kind of both. So that was the point that I just sewed at the shoulder, pressing that, and then of course I am pressing the princess seam on my sewing ham. And then right about here, I realized that I needed to sew the bodice shoulders together before I can put this on. Here, before I put this on, I am folding up the edges. That's how they instruct you to do it. They also instruct you to base it, but this is such a crisp fabric, I'm not worried about it moving. But now I have to real quick sew the shoulder seams together, and the instructions on these are kind of weird. So I have gone ahead and I have sewn the first stitch on these. These are almost like a faux felted seam. They want me to turn over the fabric, press it, and then they want me to basically like top stitch it, which is what I'm doing here. And this is just kind of strange. I've not really had a pattern instruct me to do this before, but since it did, I figured I'd show you. I think I would just skip this part of the pattern in the future. And then here I've basted in the lace just to give me the guide I need. For this, I did then realize I basted the lace onto the wrong side, so I had to tear it off and redo it. This is the redone way, I believe, here. And so then the next step is to sew this blue on. This was just a super weird process because essentially this is the facing, you're sewing them together and then you're flipping it onto the outside, and this is just definitely not what I'm used to. So now that I've stitched this, I'm just clipping all my curves and corners to make sure when I flip this inside out, it works really well. And hopefully now you can see what I'm talking about. I know this was very confusing. It was very confusing when I was doing it. But as you can see here, I'm now like flipping it onto the outside where it will then act as the trim and the facing at once. And that edge that you press down will be a clean edge for you to sew down along once you're done pressing. And here I am actually stitching that down just with a top stitch on the outside. This project required me to change machine thread a ton, which is not my favorite process, but it does always make a big difference. And then with that figured out, my next step is to actually attach this to like the bodice band before I can then actually finish up the bodice. This band is just like a way to make sure the V is not going all the way down to my belly button, I guess, or not the V, but the lacing. And so it's just getting both sides to lay right, pinning them down. I also have to put on this little guy at the front for decoration that then lines up with the front trim of the dress. Once I've sewn that blue part down, I am now just pinning it. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really struggling to pin the blue fabric. Like I said, I'm just struggling overall with this poplin. It is so thick and it's so hard to get a needle or a pin through. It's definitely hard on my machine. I don't know that I would choose to work with this fabric again. The weave is just tighter than my preference. And while working to finish this part of the bodice, I'm also going to work on the back sash because that is going to be sewn in between the layers of the bodice. So I am taking the back ties and I am just basically pinning those together to get them ready to sew. And then I am sewing this on a 3/8 seam allowance instead of a 5/8. This is a thing I find very irksome on patterns when they change seam allowance. I would rather honestly waste the fabric cutting a thicker thing so that way the seam allowances are all consistent and I don't have to think about it. But this was easy enough. I mean, it's just a line in a corner. And then I am working on turning this out. I am a huge fan of waist ties. The older I get, the more my weight fluctuates. So I feel like I'm getting very, very, very fast at turning these inside out. And then once these are turned inside out, I am ready for the very, very, very satisfying job of pressing them. And then here I am basting on the ties where it tells me to on the pattern, making sure to use a 3/8 seam allowance just to keep it in the margin so I don't have to take out these stitches later. Sorry for the weird angle, but here I am just pinning the sides together. I'm not getting back to my ironing board for this because I don't need to iron anything. So I'm just doing this while sitting because it is such a short seam. I won't do this for a long seam, but on a short seam, it's totally fine for me to pin without getting up and using an ironing board. And now I am just sewing together the side body seams closed. Now we're starting on the sleeves. These have my favorite, which is an elbow dart. I don't like doing darts, however, I wish more clothing had elbow darts, so I'm always a huge fan when they have them in because it will make the sleeve function significantly better. After sewing these, I am just pressing them. Nothing very complicated here. This is very easy. And then after that, I'm doing the like fold over and press trick here with the sleeve cuff decoration things. Again, this is like the trim and the facing at once. Very interesting. Definitely a new way of doing things. And then once I have that sleeve cuff prepped, I am sewing, I guess like wrong side to right side almost, because when I flip it back out, it will then be the right side on the right side. I'm not gonna lie, it did take me a second to figure out how this worked because it was wider and I found that very confusing. But once I did, I pressed it all going the right way, and I feel like this is a really easy depiction of what I was talking about earlier, where you are pressing that thing up and it is a decoration and a facing at the same time. Since this one's less curved and complicated, I feel like it's easier to track. And then we are, of course, just top stitching that down. And then after that, I am adding the trim to the cuff. This is just like some floral trim I had in my stash. I didn't want to buy any new trim for this. Here, I have already experimented on a scrap piece of fabric and trim exactly like what width of zigzag stitching makes it blend in and sews the trim down most securely. So I'm now just using that stitch very slowly to go down this to make sure I'm not getting white thread on the blue where you're going to be able to see it. And now we're getting ready to wrap up the sleeve, sewing up the side seam. On this sleeve, I have already put in the gathering stitches. I did that back when I did the elbow dart. It is very, very, very dark out at this point, but what you see me doing here is setting the sleeve, putting in the gathers, easing everything in to get this sleeve ready to sew up. And then I sew this sleeve in. Sorry for the weird focus here. I should have definitely moved the camera, but basically I'm just putting in a normal round of stitching, and then I'm going to go ahead and use seam binding, which is what you will see me doing here, where I am using that seam binding to cover the raw edges by sewing it on and then folding it over and top stitching that down so you can't see any part of the raw seam. Well, good morning, or should I say afternoon. It is almost 1 and I'm getting ready to start sewing again. I finished the bodice. Let me real quick go get that. Okay. we have it. So except for the zipper and the lacings, the bodice is done. It's looking really cute. I definitely think my decision to do the white with the blue trim was the right choice. I will say I am not sure if the snowflakes are going to read on like my camera at all. You can very much see them in person, but I'm not sure if you can in real life. I've also already dunked this in water to get rid of all of the blue dots that were everywhere on this. I'm pretty excited. This took me, I think, 6 hours, which is a lot. So today, I'm hoping to finish up this dress, or at least finish most of the skirt. The underskirt that's like an added layer, I'm actually going to make as something I can take on and off. So that way I can have the sequins when I want and not when I want. Like when I wear this to work, I probably don't want the sequins, but when I wear this to I was gonna say parties. I don't go to parties. When I wear this in spaces where sequins are fully 100% expected, I want this to be able to have the sequins on it. Also, I feel like I want to be able to take the sequined part off to wash it. That is the plan for today. So we're just gonna go ahead and jump into sewing. I'm really excited about this. It's gonna be so beautiful. I'm gonna feel like a snow princess. So I'm gonna work on this today. I am going to need to start working on it after my job the rest of the time. So you might see me popping in different lights and different outfits. And that's just because I haven't finished this. This is gonna be my last check-in before the reveal. I just wanted to let you know that yes, there might be more than one day of time that you are about to see. So let's go ahead and hop right into the sewing. All right, we are gonna kick this off by getting the very top of the skirt sewn. So there's the top level, the middle level, and the bottom level. This top level has pockets and there's no gathering or anything like that. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, pockets are never that straightforward for me, but in theory, it's very straightforward. I am also keeping very hydrated today because I know it's gonna be a big sewing day. But once I sew up the back seam and then I'm sewing the pocket pieces together, you'll see in a second what I'm talking about, I'll be ready for the next step. So I am just pressing these open. It's so funny how all the gunnesax do their pockets different, I swear to God. These ones have a flap on the actual pattern that you're like poking them out on. Other ones do other things. It's just really interesting. You can watch my other videos for other pocket examples. And then once I have all of these pressed, I can put them on top of each other and sew the whole thing together. This is a very straightforward way to do a pocket. I like it. I like a lot of the different ways that the 70s does pockets. I definitely prefer it to the way the 40s and the 50s do pockets. But here they have you mark dots where you sew to and you're just maneuvering it all in one line. This is definitely the most simple pocket I've done, except for obviously you have to plan for it in the cutting. And then I'm just clipping those edges and then I will be ironing everything down. The seams will be open on the top and the bottom, and then there'll be kind of like flat and smushed where the pocket is. Next up, we're focusing on the peplum. This is also fairly straightforward. So there's a front and back part of the peplum and there will be a zipper in the middle. So it's two completely separate pieces. I have switched my thread color and like the other pieces I just showed you, I am sewing that side seam so it will match up with the other pieces. And then this pattern is up to its same old tricks where I am going to be folding down that edge that will eventually top stitch because this is our facing slash trim. Once I have that folded over and pressed, I have it pinned down here. This is, again, this just feels weird and it feels wrong, but it works. And I actually kind of like it as a technique. If you have a stiff enough and pressable enough fabric, this would be a nightmare on something like a rayon. And now I am just sewing all the way along the edge, usual seam allowance of 5/8. And I am clipping the corners, clipping the seams, getting everything all tidy and ready to flip so that way it will be nice and neat. It's really important for these peplums to be neat because they will be a big feature kind of hanging off the side of my hips. And as you all know, I have quite the hips, so it's very important that these look nice. And then I'm just sewing these down. For all my being rude to the poplin, I do really like the poplin on the peplum because it kind of almost works like a horsehair braid where it makes my peplum edge, like bottom edge, just a little bit stiffer, and so I think it pops out really nicely. And here I am making an error. You'll see what it is in a second, but I am pinning the peplum down to where it should sit on the skirt. Again, this is the very top portion of the skirt. The instructions have you waiting on this, like to attach this to the bodice, but I don't want to wait because I don't want to figure out how to attach this to the bodice with the 2 to 3 extra ruffles sitting down at the bottom. I want to do it now, everything's complete. All right, I am ripping out the stitches I just put in. Who guessed it on what I forgot to do? I forgot to put on the trim at this point. I had experimented with some hand sewing on the bodice on how I wanted the trim to sit. I wasn't particularly happy with that, so I decided to experiment with the machine on the sleeves, and I now need to apply it with the machine on the peplum. So I need to unpick everything so that way I can put the trim on the peplum as well as on the bodice. All right, now it is unpicked and I have it going the same way. However, making this decision makes it so I need to unpick a bunch of the trim on the bodice. And here I'm doing more unpicking because I decided to change the way I am putting the trim on. Originally, I had the snowflakes sitting out on the white, but I actually want it to sit out on the blue. I think it looks really nice there, and I think that's the way to go. So now I have to unpick everything I just did. We're really having a night. After I finish this, I am going to take a break and focus on this a different day. This is a very heavy unpick project. You see on my channel that I actually don't unpick that often. Unpicking is a huge part of sewing, but I generally try to really think things through and have good instincts for following the sewing instructions. So it's not super often that I unpick this much, and this added a ton of time to this project. And now that I've unpicked it, I am putting it the correct way onto the bodice. This is definitely worth all the unpicking work I did. This was definitely the way to go, and I definitely made the right decision. And now after that detour, we are back to basting the peplum onto the top of the skirt. We are back on track. I am now pinning the bodice to the skirt. I'm getting really excited. It's looking really cute. Everything's matching up. I was worried about the center matching up here, and it's matching up great, so I am absolutely pumped. And like the sleeves, I'm sewing this down first with a normal stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a seam binding over it. So that way I have finished seams on the waist. And I'm feeling pretty exhausted at this point in the day, so I'm going to put in the zipper real quick, which is what I'm doing here, and then I'm going to call it wraps. I'm going to try this on off camera, double check that everything's working the way I expect it to, and then I will see you when I pick this up next. It'll probably be in the evenings of the days that I work because I have now run out of time on my weekend. All right, we are all set up for after work. I am going to start by sewing all my ruffles together, or the next tiers of my skirt. The top tier is the white and it only has 3, and then the bottom tier is the blue and it has 6. So I'm just sewing those together before getting ready to press them. And then with these pressed, I am now doing the next step. I'm kind of going off book on this, but basically I'm going to do a narrow hem first where I go around once with it folded over once, and then I fold it over again and go over it again. This will just be a nice finished clean edge for me to apply the lace to. And then here I'm actually applying this lace. So here I'm using, there's like a very top row of polka dots that I'm using to put in my lace evenly, since the top is kind of like scalloped and weird. This is true of most laces like this, I think, but that was my method for keeping everything even. Again, kind of a weird angle. We're trying some new things in this video, but here what I am doing is I am putting in all of the gathering stitches for this. I use so much thread putting in the gathering stitches for these, but that's totally okay. It does the job, it does the trick. Just definitely was quite time consuming. And I'm a glutton for punishment and figured I'd get these gathering stitches put in 2. Again, remember I do 3 rows of gathering stitches, so that's what I'm doing here. There I just lost bobbin chicken. I just barely ran out of thread on the bottom bobbin, so now I have to redo that row. Lucky me. After finally getting all of the gathering stitches in, I am gathering this to fit. I'm first putting the blue ruffle onto the white ruffle, and then I'll be eventually attaching both of these to the dress. We're on to the last steps I can bear doing tonight, where first I am just sewing that down after all that gathering. This poplin was not fun to gather at all. Hurt my fingers, hurt my brain. And we are ending the night with one of my favorite steps, which is picking out all of the gathering stitches that I spent all that time putting in. I know, sounds like sarcasm, but this is actually my favorite part. I find this deeply satisfying. Another day working on this project. Here I am attaching that trim. Again, snowflakes pointing towards the blue to that ruffle hem. I'm using the same stitching technique I used on the bodice and the peplum. All of this is going smoothly. I am determined to no longer have to unpick things. And with that done, I'm finally ready to attach this ruffle to the final dress. Here I am gathering this ruffle to start, and then I will be pinning it to the markers on the dress. And after stitching this, I am again doing my favorite steps of picking out all of the gathers. I don't do this all at once because it makes me enjoy it less, and I do find this a very enjoyable process. I've gotten it down pat, I can do it very quickly, and I love pulling out the threads from this. It's probably some sort of weird impulse that I have. And now we can start working on the underskirt. So here I am sewing the snowflake material. I'm going to French seam this. So I'm first sewing them right sides together, and then I will sew them wrong sides together. I think that's the right version. But this way the seam is enclosed and the sequins can't poke me and make me cranky. And now it's nighttime of a different day. Yeah, this is taking forever to finish. But here I am sewing the side seams of the underskirt together, or there's 4 seams here and I'm sewing them all right here, right now in the dark. And then here I am, you guessed it, I am gathering again, putting in more gathering stitches. I am exhausted and so sick of gathering things that I only put in 2 rows of stitching on this. Definitely doesn't look as good as when I put in 3 rows. I was fed up at this point. I'm now sewing this again, so I'm just narrow hemming this like I did the other tier when I did the lace. And then here I am, I'm snuggling a spooky if you can't tell, and I am gathering it to fit into the bottom of the underskirt. I've already stitched this down, and then my last step for this underskirt is I'm putting this bias tape along the hem of the skirt because this won't show in theory, and I didn't want like the scratchy or pokiness of the tool at the seam to bother me since I have sensory issues. So I'm sewing this in to solve for that, and it definitely worked. And it is yet another day working on this dress. I have very little to do today though. All I have to do is here I am hand sewing in the hook and eye closure at the top of the zipper that I can't reach because it is right on that part of my back, but nonetheless we are sewing it in. And then the very last step, although it doesn't have to be, it's just my favorite and it tells me the project is done, so I wait till now to do it. I am lacing up the front of the dress, and we will now hop into the reveal. You have seen the reveal. I hope you enjoyed it, and now we are going to talk about the cost breakdown, and then I will give my final thoughts on this pattern and this project in the wrap-up. So first, for the cost breakdown, oh, I forgot that I still have the snow in my eyebrows. I hope you enjoyed that. I decided this is what I wanted, this was my vision, and I spent a ridiculous amount of time and money hunting down how to achieve my vision. So hopefully you enjoyed the snowy eyebrows. I think this might be my look from now on. But anyway, back to the cost. I have my spreadsheet here. So let's break it down. So this was a pretty expensive supply dress to make. Wow, my brain just scrambled itself. Cost. We're talking about cost. Okay, the fabric cost $135.24. That is for this blue fabric, the shimmery snowflake fabric, and the white snowflake fabric. fabric. Overall, honestly, considering the yardage and the different types of fabric I use, I'm pretty happy with that cost. Notions cost me $31.91. More than half of that is the lace. And then the pattern itself was $44.65. I think I'll use this pattern again. It needs a lot of work, but I think I will use this pattern again. So I feel like that's worth it. That brings us to supply a total of $211.80. I do like this dress. That does feel worth it for me, especially because I've been envisioning this for a really, really, really long time. And so to see it come to life was definitely worth that amount of money for me. But next, let's talk about the labor. I know a lot of you are new to this channel, so I want to real quick give a little intro of why I talk about the labor that goes into things. I know that I am not paying myself for my labor. However, I do think it's really important to talk about how long garments take to make and what a livable wage would cost, and why that dress you're buying for $20 means that a garment worker isn't getting paid. And a garment worker is a seamstress. Hello, I'm a seamstress. I don't do it for money. However, a lot of people do in the world. I just would like them all to get paid a living wage, because this is really hard work and it's really hard on your body. But anyway, this took me 18.5 hours. I can't imagine how long this would have taken if I had stuck to my original plan of hand sewing the lace. This would have taken forever. 18.5 hours, almost basically a full 24-hour period. So we multiply that by 25. I am going to change this to a living wage in the future, but this is the seamstress wage at $25. That brings us a total of $462.50 spent on labor, which brings us to a grand total of $674.30. That's just kind of a mind-boggling total, but when I think of all the different things I did, that like checks out to me. This was a lot of work. This is, I think, one of the hardest projects I've done so far. Let's ditch the budget and let's go ahead and talk about why that is. So first of all, you'll probably have noticed in the reveal how the underskirt didn't show up at all. I maybe did my math wrong. I don't know what happened, but when I installed it the way the pattern kind of had you install it with my alternative methods, it didn't hang out the bottom at all. And then I just gave up. Honestly, this project took days and days and days. I was tired, I was ready to be done, and I just couldn't figure out. I think my final plan with the underskirt is next time I'm at the thrift store and I see one of those bridal petticoats to buy one of those and then attach it to that and wear it under this dress. I do have it here. It is quite beautiful. I would have really liked to wear it. I think it would have added an extra snazzy touch, but that definitely wasn't in the cards. And I ran out of time. I ran out of energy to figure this out. Speaking of time, energy, regrets, let's talk about the dress itself. I'm going to first say this is a beautiful dress. I like this dress. There are 6,000 things wrong with this dress, and we're gonna get into it. All right, we're back. My camera died because nothing about this project can go smoothly. And then of course I had no batteries. For some reason all of my batteries were dead. It has been a journey, folks. But we're back. Let's continue to talk about why this dress and this whole project was kind of frustrating. So first of all, I have had this happen on a couple 70s. I think I just need to learn how to make the adjustment to make the shoulders bigger. I am so baffled by this. This dress is big on me in every single way except for the shoulders. And the shoulders are so tight, it feels like I'm a linebacker. And I'm just confused by that. Like, did people in the 70s just not have shoulders? Because this is a continual problem I have with 70s dresses. So I am gonna learn how to correct it. However, I can't even zip this up by myself because I don't have the mobility to do so. Right now I'm debating if I'm just gonna take off the sleeves, make this a sleeveless, and then basically like wear this with like a light blue or a dark blue turtleneck under it instead for winter. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking about how I can take this and make this work. The other thing, I'm actually in love with this dress. I think it's really beautiful. I think it's totally salvageable. I think I need to separate myself from it for a little bit of time. But the other thing that happened, I don't know how well you can tell. I'm gonna put a picture here of right after it happened. I spilled a ton of my matcha latte down the front the first time I wore this to work, really early at my day at work, so it looked like a baby threw up on me all day. And I've already washed it. It has not come out. After putting 18.5 hours into this dress, I'm really cranky about that. Overall, I'm feeling very crabby at this dress. I hate ending my videos like feeling kind of negative, but that's honestly just how I'm feeling right now. I will say when I put on this dress, I feel beautiful. I think it looks beautiful. Like I said, this is 100% salvageable, but right now I'm just like pissed. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm mad at this project. I'm mad at everything. And I need some space from this beautiful dress. I think one of my other frustrations is I literally can't zip this up by myself. This is a chain that I use to attach to my zipper so I can zip up zippers by myself really easily. I'm actually hypermobile, so I have a lot of flexibility, so I can touch pretty much all spots of my back when fabric isn't constricting me. But because of the way these shoulders constrict me, I can't zip this up even with this one. So yeah, I'm not particularly pleased about that. But on positives to end it, I absolutely love the mix of trims on this dress. I think this trim right here, the floral trim, looks snowflakey enough that it passes as snowflakes, and I think it's really beautiful. You probably saw in the reveal, you probably saw I wear they're called Numi. They're like sweat absorbing shirt. Disgusting, I know, but I'm a really sweaty person, so I wear these garments underneath my clothing to protect my clothing. I was wearing it with this guy, and you can probably see it come out the top, but I do really like, because I basically skipped a ½ inch, this is like a really, really beautiful and wide neckline, and I really like it. I like feel very beautiful in it, and it's like kind of more, I guess, sensual for me, and I really enjoy that. So I actually am not a fan of peplums normally, but I adore this peplum. I think it's so beautiful. It's like just right. It's that I think I just don't like, was it the 2010s? There was at some point in my like teenage, early adult where peplums were really in, and I just like feel like the way they were in, they just aren't like, a poorly constructed peplum looks terrible. However, something like this, I particularly like that the poplin, which is a pretty stiff fabric, like kind of keeps it flared out from my body. I actually could see myself adding this peplum to other gunnesax because I think it's that pretty. I love the way this pattern has this go down the front. I really enjoyed this pattern. Like I said, the only problem is the shoulders. If I can figure out the shoulders, I think I'm going to use this pattern a ton. I guess the underskirt, that didn't work out quite so well. I also need to figure that out. I also love this lace down here that looks like little snowflakes. I just think this dress is overall themed really well. For the matcha stain on this, I will say, like, I wear stained things all the time. It's just kind of part of the territory when you wear vintage. I'm trying not to get too upset about it. I think it's because like I had just literally finished it the night before and had spent 18.5 hours on it. And so staining it was just really, really hard for me, honestly. Like, I had to keep myself from crying at work about it because I was really upset. But I'm thinking about whether maybe I should try ice dyeing it or just dyeing it all over just like a really light blue so the stain will meld. We'll just kind of see. I'm kind of waiting to see what the stain does because it's slowly starting to turn brown. Matcha, when it first stains, is a really bright green, and then in theory over time the pigment breaks down and it becomes brown. So we're gonna see how that goes. I don't really want to over dye it until I know how yellowy this brown is going to be because that will impact the dye I choose. I think there's multiple ways to kind of work with this staining. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting potential things. I think I will have to not look at it like that for a couple months. However, I will say, because I stained it, this is going to be my I'm going out to eat dress for this Christmas season. I am going to wear it on Christmas Day, when we go to the buffet, when we go to tea, like everywhere. I am going to be wearing this dress for everything because since it's already stained, it's a low stakes game. No big deal if I stain it more. So I'm going to do that, and even though, like I said, it's tight on the shoulders, it is loose everywhere else, so good stomach room for food. If you lived in the 70s, I know quite a few of you who watch this do, because you'll comment that you've used the patterns like when you were a girl. If you lived in the 70s, how did you deal with the arms? Because I have narrow shoulders. Like I have really small shoulders, like to the point that I have to actually alter most garments to fit narrow shoulders. So if I, as somebody with narrow shoulders, struggles with the 70s like shoulders, how did you guys do it? Tell me about it. Actually, honestly, all this joking is making me feel much better about this dress. I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, I've almost cried multiple times in frustration over this dress. So I'm feeling much better about it already and talking about the things I love about it. And I will say, like, looking at the photos, looking at the video of me wearing it, it is stunning. It is a stunning dress. And like I said, I think with a short time out, I will feel really good about this one. For the crown, I was going to include it in this video, but this video ended up being way longer than planned. So I'm actually going to include the cost analysis, the making of it, the time it took in a different video. It's going to be like a short, like 5 to 10 minute bonus video. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned for that if you want to see how I made this. I learned so much during this project. Like I said, I'm feeling more upbeat now that I've talked about all the things I do love about this project. And I do feel beautiful in this dress, even though it does also kind of make me feel like a line blacker. So, you know, It's a process. Sewing's a process. As always, you can leave me a tip over on Ko-fi. This really just helps fuel my channel, gives me more money to spend on supplies, stuff like that. I have some really cool stuff coming up next year. Since this is my last sewing project of the year, definitely comment down below or give this a thumbs up to support my channel. It always really helps me out. And other than that, if you're new, definitely hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!